The Indiana Hoosiers have yet again another top 5 matchup, but this time it's the number 2 Kansas Jayhawks, and this time it's at home at Assembly Hall. Can the Hoosiers pull off the upset?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Come in, it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins, and we've got a good one for you today. I appreciate you making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen each and every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. If you're on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are doing well. We are pushing 2,000 subs, and we expect to hopefully hit that very, very soon. So thank you so much if you've already done that. If not, it would mean the world to us if you could do that. If you're on any of your podcasting platforms, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So be sure you subscribe on there, turn on notifications everywhere you are so you don't miss an episode just like this one as we talk about Indiana and Kansas. But before we do, want to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Indiana's already played a top 5 team once this year. Didn't go as planned. You lost to UConn by 20. Now you have another chance to do so, and it's the number 2 Kansas Jayhawks. This is not in a neutral site game in an early season tournament. Oh no, this is number 2 Kansas, top 5 team in the country, head coach Bill Self, who's a Hall of Famer, whether you like the guy or not. And this time, it's going to be right here in Bloomington at Assembly Hall, one of the greatest venues in all of college basketball, has a chance to remind the country what they are about and who we are as Indiana basketball. I am so excited for this game tomorrow. I cannot stand it. And thank God it's an early afternoon game, right? Thank God it's not like an 8 o'clock game. I just don't know if I could make it all the way to Saturday night. And so I'm really excited for this game. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun. And when you start looking around at predictions and betting lines aren't out yet. That'll be released late here Friday night or tomorrow morning on Saturday before the game. Predictions are saying Kansas wins this thing by 5 or 6. And if you look at the ESPN FPI matchup predictor, as of right now, if you round up and down to get to even numbers, it's 67% Kansas and 33% for Indiana. And so we're going to talk about what the Hoosiers have to do. Can they pull the upset? We asked this question the first time when we played UConn. Didn't work out. Indiana played good in that game, though, but they just didn't play well enough to win. Now you're coming off a pretty horrid loss against Auburn. How do you bounce back, right? That's the question you have to start with, and how do you pull the upset? We'll talk about keys to victory and matchups to watch later on in the episode as well, but that's exactly where I want to start is how do you bounce back from the Auburn game, right? Because I don't know if it benefits you or hurts you not having a game this entire week in between that, right? You have nothing. You had the Auburn game, and now here you are taking on the number 2 team in the country. And we are going to find out exactly what this team is, not where they are. Not where they are. We're going to find out what this team is right here, right now in this 40-minute basketball game. Win or lose, I think it tells us everything we need to know. I do. I think it tells us everything we need to know about this team's mental toughness, physical toughness, how good they are, how together they are, and what the potential of this season could be. I know it's hard to put that on one game, and it's not just any game. It's the number 2 team in the country, but this game means everything to college basketball. This game means everything to us here in Indiana, in Bloomington, for everybody around this program. And this is an opportunity to make up for what happened a week ago but also to get back on the map a little bit this season. People have forgotten about Indiana because they hadn't done a whole lot up to the Auburn game, right? They had the loss to UConn. They had some wins in the Big Ten. And then you got the brakes beat off of you against an SEC team. Everybody has laughed at us for a week now. But guess what? That all goes away. It all goes away if you can beat Kansas. And this is on Mike Woodson. This is on this coaching staff. This is on the players in that locker room. How do you respond? How do you learn from what happened a week ago? And how do you get better as a basketball team? Do you have better communication on the offensive and defensive sides of the floor? Do you have more effort, better rotations, running through screens, right? Do you have effort in your backdoor cuts, in your loose balls, in your fast breaks, right? Are you picking your teammates up when they fall down, or are you walking away and letting them pick themselves up? Those are the things that have not been happening, right? All of those big moment things and those energy things and the effort things have not been happening. And what's worse is that the players know it. Gabe Cupps talked about it after the Auburn game, that this team has to give more effort and you got to execute. And those things go hand in hand. Has Indiana learned this week in practice? I don't know. We're going to find out. Have they realized, hey, we can run with this Kansas team if we play our best basketball? I hope so, because I think they can. I absolutely think they can. I think this Indiana team can run and hang and beat this Kansas team if they play their best brand of basketball. Have we seen that this year? Heck, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think we've seen Indiana's best. Do you? Do you think we've seen the best that this team can be this year? There's no shot. There's no way. There's too much talent, too much potential, too much skill on this team for them to have reached their peak already. Now, as of this show, Xavier Johnson is not playing. That could change. I haven't heard anything or seen anything up to this point. So we're going to act like that he's not playing. We've talked about immensely what he means if he's on the floor. But if he's not there, which seems to be the case, but again, it could change between now and Saturday's tip. If he's there, Indiana has a much better chance to win. Because look at Kansas's guards. We're going to talk about those guys in a second. This team is good. They have height. They have skill. They have shooting. They have inside scoring. They have playmakers. They have leaders. And I don't know if Indiana has that right now. And I hope they found one this week. Oh my gosh, I hope they found one. So we're going to talk about this game as if Xavier Johnson does not play because he hasn't been playing. Indiana has to find their guy. Has to find their guy. Go to your strength, which is inside play, scoring in the paint, and forcing teams to take tough shots. That's what Indiana needs to do to win this basketball game. And coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, we're going to talk about the matchups to watch, the keys to victory, and how I think Indiana can pull this upset. I think they can do it. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take your best game. It's going to take probably a bad game, not necessarily a bad game, but not a great game from this Kansas team for that to happen. But I think it can. And we'll talk about all that coming up on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best ticketing option if you are looking for concerts, tickets, and concerts and plays. That's what I was trying to think of. Plays and so many different great events. And there's so many times where it's so frustrating trying to buy tickets from sites that you're not familiar with and making sure you get the right price and you get the right seat. Sometimes it's a last minute decision and you just can't get there, right? You just can't figure out how you're going to do it. And you shouldn't have to worry about that when you're buying tickets to your next big event. You have Game Time to get tickets to this game, Indiana and Kansas, some of the biggest games, the biggest game of the year so far here in Bloomington. Other events like plays and musicals in bigger cities over in Indianapolis, or if you want to go somewhere else, you can use the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals, and views from all seats in the venues. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, Indiana, you got a couple keys to victory here, okay? You got a couple keys to victory, and you've got some matchups that I want to watch for. We'll get to the matchups here in a minute, but the keys to victory for the Hoosiers in this, how in the world is head coach Mike Woodson and this Indiana squad going to pull the upset over Kansas? Well, let's look at Kansas for just a minute. All right, let's look at this team. Number 2 team in the country. They're 9-1 overall, and their only loss was to a top 4 Marquette team at the time. Okay, a really good Marquette team, 73-59, a Marquette team that just pulled away from them late. They have wins over Kentucky. They have a win over what was then top 10 Tennessee. They also have a win over that UConn team by 4, the team that beat us by 20, right? And they have a win over Missouri out of the SEC. Their non-conference schedule is legit. And now they come to Indiana before they start Big Ten play. They have 2 games after this. Shouldn't be an issue. This is a huge game. And you talk about 2 blue bloods, man. You talk about 2 of the biggest brands in college basketball. How much bigger does it get? Indiana and Kansas. You think about Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina. These are all in the same group. This is a huge game. It will be watched nationally. Everybody who is a college basketball fan will be watching this game early Saturday afternoon. And you look at this Kansas team and how they got to their 9-1 start. Well, Hunter Dickinson helps, the Michigan transfer, averaging 19 points, 12 rebounds a game, 12 and a half rebounds a game, actually. Dejon Harris, their guard, who averages 7 assists. We're going to talk about him. And Kevin McCullar, their other guard, who is really, really good. This team, they're not extremely deep, okay? They're not extremely deep. I don't think you're going to see what we saw against Auburn, like what we're going to see against Kansas. But, man, their starters are good. Their starters are extremely good. Hunter Dickinson averaging 19.4 points a game. Kevin McCullar Jr. averaging 19 points a game. And KJ Adams, the forward, averaging 13 points a game. Nobody else is in double digits. So, realistically, if you stop those guys, you got a good chance. But it's easier said than done. You're looking at Hunter Dickinson, who is going to be in the running for National Player of the Year. That guy is unbelievably good. He averages a double-double for a reason. And here's the thing. This Kansas team shoots the ball pretty well. They don't shoot it a lot, especially from deep, and we're going to talk about that. But as a team, they shoot 52%. Those 3 guys that have double-digit points, here are their field goal numbers, 64, 51, and 68. That's pretty good. That's pretty efficient, which tells you this. If you haven't watched this Kansas team, I have. They go down low. They go inside. They want to use their size and their skill to their advantage. Sounds like something else somebody else should do, but Kansas does that very well. And Bill Self knows the strengths of his basketball team. Indiana has to match up down low. Be physical, be present, and don't back down. This is a huge opportunity for Kel'el Ware, Malik Reneau, and Mackenzie Mbako to finally show some physicality and show some grit in the paint. And if they do, I think the Hoosiers have a good chance to win. Now, outside of the paint, at the free throw line and the three-point line specifically, Kansas is not all that great of a shooting team, okay? Their free throw percentage is 70% as a team. Not bad. Not bad. But that also includes Dickinson shooting 73 and KJ Adams shooting 48. So there's that. There's not a ton of attempts there, but 48 is still not a good number. And then three-point shooting. They're 38%, which is pretty darn good. they just don't shoot it all that much. They don't have that many attempts this season. I had the number pulled up. They've shot 173 total threes. That's not that many. 19 from Dickinson. He doesn't shoot many, but he's made a pretty high number of them. The guy that shot, nobody has shot more than 14 all year. And that's Kevin McCullar Jr., who's 14 of 37. That's not great. A little under 50% is not bad, but they don't shoot many threes. So what does that tell me? Tells me they want to go down low. Tells me they want to use their size. So Indiana has to cut that off. Avoid that. Pack the paint, extend out, and make them take contested 18, 19-foot jumpers. Make them shoot the three ball. I know their shooting numbers are high percentage-wise, but they don't shoot a lot of them. So if you're Mike Woodson, right, and this is kind of a question and an open-ended question, I guess, do you pressure them to shoot the basketball? Do you just absolutely pack the paint with a 2-3 zone, don't let it get anywhere near there, and dare them to say, hey, shoot the ball. Shoot the ball and beat us with your shooting stroke rather than your finesse on the inside and your physicality and your size? I don't see why not. I don't see what it can hurt, right? For a team that just doesn't have the amount of made shots that other teams do. And I know that's a weird way to say that, but don't have the proof in the pudding, if you will, on their effectiveness in shooting many, many shots and making a bunch of those shots. Pressure them to force them out of the paint. Pack in your defense and make them pass it out and take tougher shots. Closeouts are going to be big. Communication's going to be huge, okay? We know Indiana gives up a ton of threes. You can't do that. You can't give up a bunch of threes. Any shot that Kansas takes has to be contested. Has to be contested. I want Indiana switching everything. I want them communicating the switch, communicating back screens, and avoiding those backdoor cuts. Kansas loves to do that. Bill Self is a mastermind when it comes to set plays out of bounds, backdoor plays, back screens, all that stuff, okay? Indiana has to be ready. And I think your line of defense needs to be your three bigs down low and make them beat you some other way. That's all basketball is. Take their strength away and tell them to beat you some other way. Now, does that mean Kansas is going to say, oh, man, ooh, they packed the paint. Guess we got to start shooting. Guess we can't do that. No, absolutely not. They're still going to do that, which brings up foul trouble. If the Hoosiers get in foul trouble, they're done. And I'm not saying that Kansas is going to destroy you from the free throw line. I'm talking about if you get in foul trouble on the defensive end, Indiana's done for on the offensive end, because that's what the Hoosiers have to do offensively is go inside, hit Kel'el Ware, hit Malik Reneau, and let Mackenzie and Baco get hot. That's what's going to happen here. You have to go inside and use your big guys. They have to be your focal point offensively. I don't care that they have Hunter Dickinson on the other side defensively. He's just a tree down there, in my opinion. He's much better on the other end of the floor with the ball in his hands. Go at him. And guess what? When it comes to foul trouble, if you get Hunter Dickinson in foul trouble, he can't beat you on the offensive end if he's sitting on the bench. I think those are your strategies here. Defensively, pack the paint, hack them if you have to, force them into tough twos and long threes. Offensively, which we're going to get into more in just a second, offensively, you've got to follow your game, man. You've got to play your game and let Kel'el Ware and Malik Reneau do what they do best. Use their feet inside. Use their skills in the hook shots and the tough finishes and crash the offensive boards. That's what has to happen. We'll talk more about the offensive game plan and some of those matchups that we're going to see in this game as Indiana tries to pull the upset over number 2 Kansas. We'll talk some more about that coming up in just a second on Locked On Hoosiers. Before we do today, want to remind you, as we have been over the last couple of weeks, that Locked On has launched our first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's the first ever national sports streaming channel. on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts and Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Go check them out. They do a wonderful job. It's all of our shows at Locked On combined, and they just run all day long. So anything you need updated wise, you want to learn about college basketball more, NFL, NHL, NBA, you name it, they got it. Go check them out on YouTube at Locked On Sports Today. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is it's my favorite, and it's also the best and the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. This week on Prize Picks, I've done a bunch of hockey picks. I like to play the shots on goal and the goals and the saves for hockey goalies. I do a lot of stuff on the NHL, and then in the NBA, I've been hammering the 3-pointers made, man. Those are my favorite. I do 3-pointers made with a lot of NBA guys, and I pair that with the NHL guys, shots on goals and the goals allowed. Those are kind of my go-tos right now. And testing my skills on Prize Picks this season it really is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. It takes 2 minutes of your time. Do it while you're sitting in the parking lot at work before you go into the office. That's what I do. It's the best way to do it. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Indiana taking on number 2 Kansas in Assembly Hall. You've got to use that. Going to some we got into some keys to victory and getting into some matchups here in our final segment of the show. Use Assembly Hall to your advantage, okay? You are in one of the greatest venues in all of college basketball. And when it's hot, it's the toughest environment in the country. You have to use that. We've seen some magical upsets here. We've seen some magical wins here at Assembly Hall with Indiana teams that maybe shouldn't have been hanging around in some of those games, but the environment and the atmosphere and you, Hoosier fans, made that possible. That has to happen this weekend. And before we get into that, I hope that tomorrow can be almost like a revival for this Indiana team and for this fan base, right? Maybe a comeback story, if you will, and a waking up, because the vibes weren't great. Even as this team was 7-1 going into the Auburn game, the vibes were just not super high. And I think it's because we all knew kind of what this team was, and we were waiting on that kind of game to happen. And after the game, look, this has been a tough week, man. Indiana fans we have not been the happiest of bunch. But this is a time to get excited. This is a time to get back and fall back in love this season with Indiana basketball, because tomorrow has the potential to be great. Saturday has the potential to be really, really special. And the Hoosiers team, the players, the coaches have to feed off of that. But guess what, players and coaches? You have to give the fans something to cheer for and be in this game. That game a week ago at State Farm Arena, sure, Hoosier fans outnumbered Auburn, I would say 65-35. But there was nothing for them to cheer for, so it didn't matter. It didn't matter. They were out of the game within the first 7 minutes after Auburn started on that big run. This is different. This is Assembly Hall. Use that and give the fans something to cheer for. And when you look at the rest of these keys and the matchups, for me, I talked about in the Auburn game, Kel'el Ware going up against Johni Broome, but it was more Malik Reneau going up against Johni Broome. And that was more on the Auburn side of things than it was for head coach Mike Woodson. So I ask you this question. Should it be Kel'el Ware or should it be Malik Reneau that goes up against Hunter Dickinson tomorrow? Should it be Kel'el Ware or Malik Reneau that goes up against KJ Adams tomorrow? I think those are both really good matchups and questions. And then the biggest one, I know it's crazy, but this is the biggest one. Which Indiana guard can handle Kevin McCullar Jr., who averages 19 points a game? Who can stop him? Who can handle him? He's a bigger guard. I've said in the past I wanted it to be Trey Galloway, but radio silence, right? Radio silence. I don't know. I don't know. I think you have to do a rotation at this point between him and Gabe Cupps and CJ Gunn when he's in the game. Like, those guys are going to have to step up and play defensively. And again, communication is so key with high ball screens and switching and staying and doing whatever it takes to not let those guys go off on you. If you let their big three for Kansas do what they've done all year, you're going to lose. And you're going to lose by a lot. For Indiana to win this basketball game and pull off what would be the biggest upset so far this season for the Hoosiers, obviously, and one of the biggest upsets in basketball so far this season, you're going to have to shoot really well. And I'm not saying just from behind the arc. I'm just saying effective shots, efficient shots, and knock them down. You need to be playing this game in the 70s, low 80s at most. I don't want this game to get to the 80s. This needs to be in the 70s by the end of it. And if Indiana can do that, if Indiana can hang around, avoid the big runs by the other teams, right? If you somehow do get up by a reasonable amount, keep your foot on the gas, keep your hand on their throat, okay? And don't sub out all your starters, Mike Woodson, when you have a lead. Don't do that. Keep your guys in. And believe it or not, I think Indiana may have a little advantage on the depth side of things, not by much, but I think they do have a little bit of one. Use it, but don't try to overdo it. And what I mean by that, before we wrap up, don't put in the bench just because that's what your script tells you to do, or that's because you did that every other game. Stop that. Quit doing that. If somebody's playing well, I don't care if it's Ware, I don't care if it's Cupps, I don't care if it's Walker that comes off the bench and has a great game, which I think has a potential to happen. Leave them in. Leave them in. And if you take them out, it better not be for long. To recap, and why I think Indiana can, and I think Indiana will upset Kansas this weekend. You have to use the crowd. You have to win your matchups. Play this in the 70s and avoid the big runs. I've said all those things, and they're all very much true. This is a huge opportunity for this season to turn back around in the right direction. This would give you your 3-1 in this 4-game stretch that we talked about a little over a week ago, about 2 weeks ago now. You go 3-1 here, and the Hoosiers are looking pretty good because you've got 3 or 4 games coming up that are very winnable before you get into conference play. What an opportunity to put yourself back on the map this season with a win over the number 2 Jayhawks inside your building and remind the country what Indiana basketball is, who we are, what this program is, and what this program stands for. You have a chance to do that this weekend. I think it's going to be fun. If you have a chance to be there, be loud, be proud, and be honored to be at this venue. This will be one of the greatest games that's played this year. It'll be one of the greatest atmospheres you'll see in college basketball all season long. And I'm looking forward to it, man. I can't wait. Drop your predictions below. If you're on YouTube, put them in the comments. I want to hear from you. What's your confidence level going into this game? I'm excited for it. We'll have a post-game reaction show that'll go live after the game Saturday afternoon, right? Saturday evening. We'll talk all about it. Let's see if Indiana can do it. It's a time to prove themselves. A time for Mike Woodson to have a really good coaching performance. One that we've not seen a whole lot of this year. I'll just be honest. A time to do that. And a time to remind everybody who Indiana basketball is. So until then, folks, please like the video on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. We're pushing towards 2K. We'd love to get there. We'd love to see that here in the next few weeks. If you're one of those already, thank you so much. If you are not, we'd love for you to be a part of this wonderful family here. We're building a great community on YouTube, across all audio platforms, and on X as well. Be sure you go and follow us on social media at Locked On Hoosiers. You can follow me on X as well. And let's have some fun tomorrow. Win or lose in this game, let's have some fun with Indiana basketball taking on Kansas. Admire what the game is and the brands that you see. Enjoy the game. We'll talk about it afterwards right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube for the video version. Go Hoosiers. We'll see what happens. And until then, Hoosier fans, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.